It was just another interview, until Morgan Freeman opened that letter, and what happened next left the entire studio in tears. This wasn't acting. This was real, and the world felt it. During a live television broadcast, something truly unexpected and profoundly emotional unfolded. Hollywood icon Morgan Freeman was handed a letter, not just any letter, but one personally sent by President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso. As Freeman began to read it, the studio grew still. And then, in a moment no one anticipated, he broke down in tears. What words could have possibly moved him so deeply? Why did this message shake the man known for his calm, powerful voice? The exchange stunned the world, leaving millions both inspired and speechless. It was meant to be an ordinary Thursday morning in Los Angeles. Freeman was seated comfortably on the set of a relaxed morning talk show. Host Olivia Sanders smiled brightly, casually asking about his newest film project. The audience clapped, softly, sipping their coffee, soaking in the warm familiarity of Morgan's legendary voice. Then, completely unprompted, Olivia paused. "We have something special for you today," she said, with a mysterious glint, reaching under her seat. She handed him a plain brown envelope. No logos, no details, just a single line written. On it, from President Ibrahim Traoré, Burkina Faso. The energy in the room shifted. Even the cameras seemed to pause. Morgan held the envelope gently, almost reverently. His hands trembled slightly. Olivia said nothing further. The audience leaned in, breathless. He opened it slowly. Inside, a single handwritten letter. As he read the first lines, something in him shifted. His expression softened. The smile vanished. His lips parted, but no sound came. Then his voice broke. Silence. What happened next wasn't performance. It was raw. It was human. His fingers clenched the paper. His steady, commanding eyes began to glisten. For a man who had spent a lifetime on screen, this was something different. He cleared his throat and whispered, "To the voice that carried our stories when we were forgotten. To the man who gave dignity to our pain, double quotes." Each word echoed like a prayer. The room, already quiet, sank into a deeper silence. The camera zoomed gently on his face. His hands were visibly shaking. "You didn't just act, you healed. You didn't just narrate. You resurrected our dignity." His voice cracked once more. A single tear slid down his cheek. Olivia remained still, moved, but letting the moment breathe. She didn't interrupt. "I am writing from a country long overlooked, but not by you. In your voice, we found ourselves. In your roles, we saw our fathers and our dreams." Morgan stopped. He couldn't go on. The letter fell onto his lap. He covered his face with both hands. This wasn't a Hollywood scene. This was a real man, overwhelmed by a message he never expected. For several long seconds, no one spoke. Then, a soft sob from the audience. A woman in the front row had tears streaming down her cheeks. A man beside her clutched his chest, visibly shaken. Freeman tried to compose himself. He gently wiped his eyes with a handkerchief and whispered, I wasn't ready for this," his voice trembling. This is different." He looked at Olivia, his eyes still wet. "I've received awards, standing ovations, honorary degrees, but no letter, no gesture has ever touched me like this." The host reached for his hand, not as a presenter, but as one soul connecting with another. Then she turned to the camera and said softly, "You just witnessed something real, something rare. A message from one leader to another, across oceans, across time." Behind the scenes, the control room froze. No one dared cut to commercial. Meanwhile, online, the clip exploded. People reposted it again and again with one simple caption: "Morgan Freeman breaks down on live TV, and we cried with him." But what else did the letter say? That part remained hidden. For now, a mystery just beginning to unfold. That night, Morgan couldn't sleep. The letter sat beside his bed, under the warm glow of a dim lamp. He read it again and again, each time slower, more consumed. There was one paragraph he hadn't read aloud. It was too intimate, too powerful, and still, it changed everything. I grew up in a small village in northern Burkina Faso, the letter began. We had no running water, no electricity. But once a month, a truck would arrive carrying a generator and a screen, and we watched movies. Morgan Freeman paused, his hand resting gently over his chest. The first voice I ever heard in English was yours, the letter continued. I didn't understand the words, but I felt them. Tears welled up again. The following morning, Morgan called the show's producers. I want to finish reading the letter on air. The producers hesitated. It wasn't on the schedule. It wasn't part of the promo tour. But after watching the viral reaction, millions of views overnight, they agreed. Morgan would return to finish what had begun. But neither he nor the world was prepared for what would come next. The studio was full. Cameras were in place. No music, no flashy intro, just silence. Morgan Freeman stepped onto the stage with the letter in hand. No script, no teleprompter. Olivia greeted him softly. He simply nodded, turned to face the audience, and began. This letter isn't just for me. It's for all of us. Then he continued reading. When I became a soldier, I carried your words in my heart. Hope is the thing with feathers, you once quoted. I remembered that line every night in the forest. Again, the room went still. Mr. Freeman, your voice gave me courage. I now lead a country that still fights for breath. But I've never forgotten that voice. That voice gave me back my name, Olivia gasped. The audience held their breath. Morgan paused, slowly lifting his eyes from the page, heavy with emotion. How does a man respond to something like this? Across the world, people watching at home were crying. Social media flooded with comments. This isn't just a letter. This is a mirror to the soul. But the letter wasn't over, and the most powerful moment hadn't happened yet. Just as Morgan folded the page, a small photo slipped out. It fluttered gently to the floor. He bent down and picked it up. It was a black and white photo. A young boy, barefoot, standing in front of a torn white sheet, stretched between two sticks, a makeshift movie screen. Behind him, other children sat on logs, staring up at the flickering image of Nelson Mandela. On screen, Morgan's voice broke. That's me, he whispered. That's from Invictus. Olivia leaned closer, stunned. You were their hero. Morgan turned the photo over. Written on the back in careful handwriting. This was the night. I decided I would one day help my people. And you, your voice, gave me that dream. The studio went silent. Even the camera crew wiped their eyes. Morgan turned toward the live camera. President Traoré, if you're watching, please know this. Your letter changed me. It reminded me why I ever stepped in front of a camera. Backstage, phones were ringing nonstop. Calls from major news outlets. But this wasn't just a moment people watched. It was a moment they felt, and millions were waiting to see what would happen next. As the letter made headlines across the globe, a quiet, urgent message traveled from Ouagadougou to Los Angeles. President Ibrahim Traoré wanted to meet Morgan Freeman privately. No cameras, no media, just a conversation between two men. One who spoke through stories, the other who had lived them. At first, Morgan hesitated. His schedule was tight, his emotions still raw, but something inside him, something from that letter, wouldn't let him rest. 3 days after the broadcast, Morgan boarded a plane. Destination: Burkina Faso. During the flight, he sat by the window, clutching the folded letter in his hands. He whispered to himself, "I need to look this man in the eye." As the plane crossed the Atlantic, social media erupted. Hashtags like hashtag the letter that broke Freeman, hashtag TRA or Eacute and Morgan. But no one online knew what this journey was really about. Because it wasn't just about a letter. It was about something deeper. Something buried in Morgan's past. Something he had never spoken about publicly. And it all traced back to a dusty village, a flickering projector, and a boy with a dream. The sun had just risen as the plane touched down in Burkina Faso. There was no red carpet, no crowd, just one government vehicle, and a translator named Awa waiting on the tarmac. She spoke softly. The president, he doesn't show this side of himself to many people. But your letter, it meant everything to him. Morgan looked at her. "Why me?" he asked quietly. She smiled. "Because you gave him hope at a time when hope was almost impossible to find." They continued driving, passing through villages slowly waking up. Women balanced buckets of water on their heads. Children, barefoot, walked together to school. Men hunched over bicycles, trying to fix worn-out chains. Nothing felt staged. Everything was real. When they reached the presidential compound, Ibrahim Traoré was already waiting. He wore no suit, no military medals, just a plain shirt and eyes filled with stillness. Morgan stepped out of the car slowly. The two men locked eyes. No handshake. No greetings. Just silence and a soft mutual nod. Then, President Traoré stepped forward, holding a faded photograph. "Do you remember this boy?" he asked. Morgan took it. It was the same black and white image, but now, clearer. The boy's eyes, they looked familiar. Deeply familiar. "Wait, this child. He looks like my cousin," Morgan whispered. Ibrahim gently placed a hand on Morgan's shoulder. He wasn't just watching you. He was waiting for you. Inside the compound, the president led Morgan to a quiet garden. No security, no aides. Just the two of them under the shade of a wide tree. And then, Ibrahim began to speak, not as a head of state, but as a man remembering his past. "After my father died," he said softly, "I lost everything. But I found a new kind of father through a voice. A voice that told stories. A voice that gave dignity to the broken." Morgan sat quietly, his hands trembling just slightly. Then Traoré leaned closer. "There's something I've never told the world. I had a brother. His name was Kosi. He looked exactly like you." Morgan froze. "I had a cousin," he said slowly, "named Cassie. We lost him. He just disappeared. We never found out where he went." Ibrahim reached into a leather folder and pulled out an aged piece of paper, a photograph. It showed Kosi standing beside a much younger Ibrahim, both boys smiling. "We used to talk about you every night," Traoré said, "until the day he vanished." In that moment, it stopped being just a story about a letter. It became something else, something personal, an intersection of family, memory, and pain. The past wasn't just catching up, it was calling out for healing. Morgan knew there was more to this journey than he could have ever expected. Later that afternoon, Morgan walked slowly beside President Traoré through a quiet village on the outskirts of the capital. Children waved, laughing and unaware of the weight these two men carried. Then Traoré stopped. They stood in front of a crumbling wall, faded by sun and time. He pointed to a faint engraving scratched into the brick. A name, Kosi Freeman. Morgan froze. This was his name after he left America? He asked, voice barely audible. Traoré nodded. He said he wanted to keep your family name, to honor you. Morgan knelt down, brushing the dust from the wall with his fingertips. The letters were aged, but still visible. The name had been there for decades. "He always said he wanted to become like you," Ibrahim said quietly. "But he never went back. Why?" Morgan asked, his throat dry. The president looked away, his voice low. There was something he felt ashamed of, something he never told me. He said, "The Freeman name deserves more than what I've become." Morgan's eyes filled with tears. "He was just a boy," he whispered. The air around them thickened. It wasn't just about grief. It wasn't just about family. It was about something long buried: pain, shame, identity, and the possibility of healing. But the most painful truth had not yet been revealed. President Traoré led Morgan to an old building, small, quiet, a single-room house. "This was Kosi's room," he said softly. "We left it exactly the way he left it." Morgan stepped inside. Dust floated through beams of sunlight cutting in from a cracked window. On a small wooden shelf were old VHS tapes, books in English, and a single torn photo of Morgan, smiling on the set of Lean on Me. Next to it, a journal. Morgan opened it, hands trembling. On the first page, in careful handwriting, it read, "To my cousin Morgan, whom I love more than he'll ever know. I didn't run away. I was taken, but I stayed, because here I was needed." Tears ran silently down Morgan's cheeks. Kosi had been kidnapped from America as a teenager. Somehow, after escaping, he never returned. But he didn't vanish into nothing. "He taught me English," Traoré said gently. "He taught many of us. He helped build this village's school. He saved lives." Morgan sank onto the edge of the bed, speechless. For so many years, he had mourned Kosi, grieved him as lost, as gone forever. But now, he was discovering Kosi hadn't vanished. He had become a hero. That night, Morgan sat beneath the stars, holding Kosi's journal tightly to his chest. President Traoré joined him quietly, taking a seat beside him, a second letter in hand. "This one," he said softly, "was meant for you. Kosi wrote it, but never mailed it. He gave it to me before he passed." Morgan's breath hitched. His fingers carefully opened the fragile envelope. Inside, a handwritten letter, aged but untouched, clean. "Dear Morgan, I still hear your voice in my dreams. When things got hard, I remembered your strength, your roles, your power. I didn't come back, because I was afraid you had forgotten me. But I never forgot you." Morgan closed his eyes. "You gave me the courage to stay, to help. I may have disappeared from your world, but you never disappeared from mine. I hope one day you'll come here and see what your voice helped build. With love, your little brother." Sighed. That was it. Morgan broke, not from shame, but from overwhelming gratitude. Pain, joy, sorrow, and love collided inside him. For the first time in years, the silence he had carried was gone. But the journey wasn't over yet. Morgan and Traoré sat together in the courtyard under a dim lantern. The letter still rested on Morgan's lap, as if Kosi had just spoken aloud. Traoré leaned in. He never stopped helping, even when he got sick. Morgan looked up, startled. "He was sick?" Traoré nodded. "Malaria. He refused to leave the village. Said his story had to end where it began, with the people." Morgan's throat tightened. He fought back tears. "He died here?" Traoré gently handed him something else, a faded photograph. Kosi, smiling softly, a little weaker, surrounded by children holding books. "He taught them to read," Traoré said, "using your movie scripts." Morgan looked down at the photo, hard, heavy. The Shawshank Redemption, Invictus. They knew every line. Morgan clutched the photo to his chest. He had once believed that fame was his greatest legacy, but now he understood. It wasn't the roles he played. It was the hope his voice gave to someone the world had forgotten. And in that hope, Kosi had found his purpose. And now, maybe Morgan had found his too. But President Traoré had one final surprise. A promise that had been waiting for years to be fulfilled. The next morning, Morgan was driven deep into a rural village. Children followed the vehicle, waving and beaming with joy. The energy was contagious. They stopped at the end of a dusty path. Ahead stood a small school building, its walls freshly painted. Above the doorway, a hand-carved wooden sign read, "Casey Freeman Community School for Hope." Morgan's hands flew to his mouth. He stepped back, stunned. Traoré walked beside him, speaking softly. "This school exists because of him, and because of you." Morgan stepped inside. The walls were covered in student drawings, rainbows, families, dreams. A classroom buzzed with laughter. Children were reading aloud in English. A smiling teacher walked over and handed Morgan a small notebook. Inside were handwritten messages. "Dear Morgan Freeman, thank you for helping my teacher dream big. Your voice helped us believe. Sai said, you were a king. We think you are too." Morgan sat slowly on a tiny wooden bench, overwhelmed. He had never imagined that his legacy, his real legacy, would live here, in Burkina Faso, inside a humble village school, built through sacrifice, brotherhood, and a love that had crossed continents. He looked at President Traoré and whispered, "You've done more than just lead, Mr. President. You've healed a part of me I never thought could be healed." Before Morgan left for the airport, Traoré invited him to a small village gathering. No cameras, no media, just people. An old man played soft music on a kora, and children performed a skit based on the bucket list. Everyone laughed, even Morgan. At the end, President Traoré stood up, holding a wooden box intricately carved with West African patterns. He opened it and handed Morgan a medal. "This isn't from the government," he said. "This is from the people, for the man who gave us a voice before we had one." Morgan took the medal, speechless. In that moment, he wasn't an actor. He wasn't a celebrity. He was simply a man, one who had unknowingly touched a world he had never seen. As the stars shimmered overhead, Morgan whispered a quiet prayer. For Kosi, for the children, for President Traoré. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice trembling. Traoré smiled gently. "No, thank you." And just like that, a wound that had remained open for decades finally closed. But the world wasn't done with this story, because when Morgan returned home, he brought something back with him. Something that would change everything. A final message for the world. 3 days after returning to the US, Morgan Freeman appeared on 60 Minutes for what was intended to be a short segment about his trip to Africa. But when the cameras rolled, the unexpected happened. Again, Morgan placed the original letter from Ibrahim Traoré on the table in front of him. "This," he said, voice cracking, "this is the most powerful letter I've ever read in my life." He paused. Then, with trembling hands, he began reading a section never shared before. "Dear Morgan, you have unknowingly mentored millions across Africa. Your voice reached my people before any government aid ever did. When we had no electricity, your words still echoed through old radios, powered only by hope." Morgan stopped reading. His voice broke. Tears filled his eyes. He whispered, "He called me a light, but he doesn't know. He became mine." The studio went completely silent. No cue cards, no edits, just raw, unfiltered emotion. Within hours, that moment exploded online. Millions watched. Millions cried. But more importantly, millions now knew the name Ibrahim Traoré and why one letter could change everything. The days that followed were surreal. Major global news outlets picked up the story. The names Freeman and Traoré began trending worldwide. Schools started requesting copies of the letter. Oprah, moved by the broadcast, called it a masterclass in humanity. Morgan's inbox overflowed. Messages from teachers in South Africa, youth leaders in Brazil, a prison chaplain in the US. Each one echoed the same powerful truth. This letter didn't just speak to Morgan Freeman. It spoke to all of us. Donations poured in. The Kosi Freeman School in Burkina Faso became a global symbol. In just 48 hours, enough was raised to build 3 more schools across the region. And then came one more surprise. President Ibrahim Traoré released a short video. No suit, no official backdrop. Just him, standing beside schoolchildren beneath a setting African sun. He said, "This is not a story about one man. It's about all of us, about choosing compassion, even when no one is watching. Let's build more light, together." His calm words echoed across continents. He didn't ask for praise, but the world gave it anyway. Not as a politician, but as a humble servant of the people. 1 week after the letter was first read aloud, Morgan returned to his quiet home in Mississippi. He placed the letter in a glass frame above his writing desk. But he didn't stop there. He announced the creation of a new foundation, the COSI Project, Stories That Heal its mission, to fund education and storytelling initiatives across underserved African communities. The first official partner? The Office of the President of Burkina Faso. During the first live stream for the project, Morgan looked directly into the camera and said, "I used to think my greatest legacy was on film." He paused, then added, "But I was wrong. My greatest legacy was in a letter from a man who saw the world, not as it is, but as it could be." He smiled softly. And it all began with a boy named Kosi and a leader named Ibrahim Traoré. The screen faded to black. One final image appeared, a single candle, being passed from one child to another across the world. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share in the comments how it made you feel. Was it the letter? The school? The tears? We want to hear it all. Let's fill the comments with light. Let's keep this legacy alive. And remember, sometimes a small letter can lead to a big change. I used to think my greatest legacy was on film, but I was wrong. My greatest legacy was in a letter from a man who saw the world, not as it is, but as it could be.